So yeah, I think we're now on to Bob. Oh yeah, remember Bob has his own web business selling nuclear products. Well, this is his website, so we'll post a link to it. So I did post it on my socials. Sorry, we lost a few people. So yeah, what's interesting though, you can buy glowing soap or radioactive soap, like Madame Curie, I guess. Good for your skin. So yeah, he's got these bars you can buy on his website called uranium, plutonium, radon, and what's that one? Therium. Or you can buy a gift pack of all four. Not cheap though, $7.50 US. Glowing soaps. I suppose they're sort of novelty, but I don't know how safe it is. I remember years in the past, they used to think radiation was good, and they used to radiate themselves and drink radiated water and all that sort of stuff. So it must have caused a few people to lose their teeth in here, I'd say. Yeah, they might say, "Oh, yeah, it's safe," but you end up using it, and then another 10 years later, say, "Oh, actually, the soap had this chemical in it." And it makes you sterile. So yeah, that's his website there. If you want to go and check it out, he's got lots of other products on there. A radioactive paint. If you go to his main page, I think that must be it. It looks like a web page out of the 1970s, if you ask me. It's not very well visually nice to look at. Looks like the early web pages, when HTML was first invented. So yeah, for a clever man, could at least hire someone to do a better website. So yeah, it sells all sorts of things, including meteorites and microscopes, and radiometers and crystal radios from like you used to get in the old days, which pick up AM, and rocket engines, of course, which will be on that movie, because Corbell will show you on his rocket bike or rocket go-kart, I think is another one he does. And also he was working on a rocket car, I think. They're still here, cool. So yeah, he's got one of these things that spin around when the sunlight hits it. They're pretty cool to watch, those things. What they call them, radiometers. But he's also got radioactive detection. Where's that one? Up here somewhere. You can get anti-radiation pills, which is like potassium iodine. Where is it? Radiation detection. Here we go. And so, we're looking at AliExpress, where you can get one for $50. He's selling one for a mere $149. Although it might be better, I'm not too sure, but still, it doesn't look much different than their one. Guide counter. And then he's got one for gas detection, radon gas detector, 179. Whew. And alpha radioscope, optical Geiger counter. So what does it do? Sort of light up when radiation hits it? I don't know, maybe. If you got lots of money to burn, I guess you could buy one and have a play with it. What's it say? Something for 10 to 15 minutes before viewing. Alright, so you hold it up and then you look in the eyepiece by the sounds of it. I think it would be really cool to take one of those meters and hook it up to a disco light and have the disco light change colors to how fast the radiation's working. You know what I mean? One of those LED disco lights, the sort of thing I would probably do. I would feed the sound input into the front, because they have actually an input for the volume. and you can adjust the volume, and then have this disco light spinning in time to the radiation, background radiation. Maybe one day I'll do it. Who knows? I might be able to afford all this $50 meters or whatever and set it up and do a video for you guys sometime. Sort of thing I used to do as a kid. Looks like Bob was into that sort of thing too. Close tab. So that brings me to Area 51. And I talked about this in my documentary. Apparently here is S4. It's meant to be in this little corner here, down here near the, what do you call it, the Pascagoula Lake? What's it called? Pascagoose? Something like that. Where's the label? I can't read it. It's smaller. What's that say? Pascagoose? Pascagoose. I'm not sure how you say it. I suppose I have to overlay the original one. That one there, that will tell us. What's that say? Papoose Lake, which is not really a lake, it's a salt bed. So apparently it's in here when you watch my documentary, round about here, I think it was, on this side, facing that way. I did find some interesting things, but of course we're looking by satellite, not from street view, which is what we need. And even street view, if it's camouflaged properly, you can see we can only get so much detail here. You can see some black shrubs on it and black rocks probably, and water runoff. But can you see hangar doors? Not really. But if you look at World War II bunkers, you're not going to see them even from space, because the doors, the way they were designed was so you couldn't see it from airplanes, like bombers. So what's this bit down here? A little black line here. So Area S4 is meant to be there somewhere. And what was interesting about this to me was Area 51's up here. So on the other side of the mountain. And if we zoom into this one, they've got some interesting new buildings going up, or runways. And what I found interesting was this area down here. If it stops scrolling away, we've got masses and masses of pile or dirt, which means they're tolerant, they're going underground. And they're dumping, making a mountain here of dirt. And these things here look like they could be going underground. What are they exactly? I don't know. Could that be like on the Thunderbirds when a helicopter or something lands, or whatever, or a UFO lands? Does it simply go underground and slide along, and then a similar thing pops up underground and closes again? You know what I mean? It's a bit hard to explain it. So that's what had my suspicion that the mounds of dirt there. But this strange thing here is really strange. Funny shape. That again looks like it could be to do with some underground entrance, maybe. Funny road system. Why would you have a road system like that? Doesn't make sense. It looks like a car is there. That shows you how big it is. Looks like a car there, maybe. Although we haven't got enough information. It could be also a little building, but if that's a little building, it just shows how big it is. Here's a bigger building. Could that be cars? Here we go, we've got some cars or something here. Looks like a truck even. It's quite big. Shows how big this project is. So if that's a truck next to the building here, that's like at least 10 trucks wide going around. And then that connects to the main runway system, which is even bigger. There's all the runways. So if a plane lands, it could taxi towards the other section, I guess. So let's see. Oops, gone too far now. So there is an overview, better. Looks like it could easily taxi to here, all the way to these other things here, to where the mounds of dirt are, which is right next to the mountain range. So if they've got tunnels underneath all this, quite easily it could connect to the other side where they say S4 is. So to me, that's plausible, even though you can't see it. There's some strange runway shapes. And I don't think it's to do with underground antennas, but it could be. But it's kind of strange, though. What else we got up here? Looks like some more piles of dirt, maybe. Looks like a lot of construction going on. Looks like more dirt dumped. What's that? What's all this? That's strange. It's got a strange shadow there. Is that going into a side of a mountain there? Or a mound of dirt that they've built up? Let's have a look. Just looks like something's been made there underground. Maybe hardened with concrete to make it stronger on top from bombs. Because if you look at that, we're talking about little tiny buildings here compared to the size of what's going on here. That looks like an entrance to me, but we're only seeing it from top. If you have a look at underground entrances, they're sort of shaped like a Y. I mean a V shape. Underground tunnel entrance. We'll probably get some German ones. So, what's going on? There's some of the old ones that we get. So here's the V-shaped entrances that I'm talking about that you get. But obviously their one's a lot bigger because you can compare it to the size of the building. See, it's got these V shapes that comes out here. Still not getting one I'm after though. These are all old designs. See, there's one going into a mountain. I'll probably need to type USA or something. Some of the new underground bases they got there. Entrance USA. Yeah, that's a pretty long truck there. Does that mean it's got so many trailers or what? Oh no, individual trucks. So let's have a look. It's funny how you can't find it when you want to look for one. I did put a few on episodes over the top over different periods. So what's this one here? That looks like the same type of entrance I'm talking about. It's got that V shape going on. Where's that one? Camp David. So here, whereabouts was it? Gone off it now. Yeah. So it kind of looks like it's concrete walls either side here, and the entrance is going here. A bit blurry though. The thing is, you don't see mounds of dirt over this other side, I don't think, away from the mountain. It's just all salt bed concrete runways. And we've got this bit here. Oh, look, looks like tunnel entrances are going. Just like we were looking at. Two side by side. Square pad in the middle of nowhere. And that looks like mounds of dirt happening here. That looks like mounds of dirt. So definitely digging underground. Anyway, that's probably why they probably wanted to censor the whole thing, probably. What do you think about that? Are you guys still there or not? So yeah, I find it quite interesting myself to look over these things and see if it matches up with the story. So for a standpoint of Bob Lazar, where they're claiming his location where he said it was all flat. See, there's a mountain here, Papoose Mountain. It's right near all this stuff here, which looks like it's got mounds of dirt, like they're tunneling underground. The thing is, they got all this area here. They can sort of spray it on the ground so it looks flat rather than having a mound. So you wouldn't know if they were digging underground because they're easy be able to hide it because they've got plenty of ground where they can sort of just spray the dirt on top forever, you know, and just make a road on top of it or whatever. But if they got UFO technology, of course, they can just lift it up in a big, what do you call it, like a crate or cargo container and sort of dump it out to sea somewhere. So yeah, we'll just get rid of that. So that brings me to maybe I'll talk about gravitational waves after. But it brings us to this guy here called Tom Mahood, who's put out a story about Bob Lazar. Hang on, I need a drink. Yes, so China is expanding really quickly, and they're doing a lot of stuff for outer space at the moment. I think that's what's got America worried, is because they could get into space and start mining before America has a chance to even control or stop it. But imagine if they went to one of the moons on one of these planets and found masses and masses of gold. Look how rich they would be. All they had to do is transport it to a space station above Earth and simply drop it out to sea, probably from space, and some sort of parachute drop, and just send the spaceship back to get more. So this guy here sort of talks about Bob's story in a way that you haven't heard about it before, which is quite worth a read. I will post the link down the side, but I did post it on my social pages. Did I miss something there? So let's scale up the font a wee bit. I don't think I'm going to read it all out though. I'll just read bits of it. So it basically starts off looking at the Bob Lazar story from a perspective of 2018 by Tom Mahood. I really don't want to be writing this as I have way better things to do. I thought I'd happily left all this crap in my rear view mirror 20 years ago, but apparently not. Recently, I've noticed an increase in number of visitors to my ancient blue fire part of my website coming from UFO sections of Reddit. Seems like they were looking for information on Bob Lazar. Tracking links back from Reddit, I was surprised to find a number of current discussions on Lazar and his veracity. Is that how you say that word? Sadly, there was quite a few posts saying how they believed Lazar's story and he was the real deal. And I'm pretty sure many of those posters were small kids, posters, I mean, not posters, were small kids or not even born when this stuff first went down years ago. So that's his sort of opening there. What else do we need to read of it? First and foremost, I need to touch on the basic science in Lazar's tale. In the world of scientific research, the hardest insult that can be leveled against someone's work is that the person is not even wrong. Person is not even wrong. In other words, the research or theory is so bad it really can't even be discussed coherently. If I was feeling charitable, and I'm not, I suppose Lazar's story might just barely reach the not even wrong level. Now, as someone with a real master's in physics, with a focus on gravitational, no less, which is what he did. Apparently, he worked at as a physicist at LIGO, which was a big array to detect gravitational rays on the planet from outer space. So I'll be covering what he's talking about here in more detail. I could go for many pages pissing all over Lazar's nonsensical tale, but it would have to become very technical, and the Hawkard Lazar believers would not be swayed, so why should I bother? That's how I feel sometimes. So, yeah, it's a good article. Problem though is mainstream science is like a bit of a cult. So, you know, a lot of them believe in the Big Bang Theory, not the TV show, but the actual theory that the universe is expanded and we started from a single point, something from nothing, which doesn't really happen in science. You can't get something from nothing. So gravitational waves also links back into the creation theory of the universe, which again is not provable, and that's sort of fiction, as a lot of people talk about sci-fi, because there's a lot of problems with the Big Bang Theory and why they keep trying to hold on to the idea that the Big Bang Theory is correct by keep adding new mathematics in it, string theory, dark matter, you name it. They try and twist it and mold it so they can keep on with the Big Bang, that God created the universe from a massive explosion which instantly expanded. It didn't take time. It took no time at all to expand the whole universe out 13 billion years or whatever it was, 13.8. So here he goes on to say, This should be quickly easy for anyone to understand, but actually it's not. You still need a wee bit of understanding. Looks like we scared most people off it now, have we? I've only got you again. So recall this less Bob Lazar surfaced with his tower well before gravitational wave observations such as LIGO, Virgo, Geo 600 had even been designed, much less operational. If Lazar's sources did indeed operate like he claimed, grabbing distant portions of space-time and pulling it towards them, they would generate enough gravitational waves to knock the observatory's uh, interferometer mirrors off their damn mounts. So what he's saying is, if we had UFOs flying all around Earth at the moment, with the method that he's saying, with the gravitational beams or pulses, with the three things underneath. See if we can find a picture because he hasn't included the picture. So we need to start breaking it down. Bob, this UFO program. I didn't type it wrong. So this is his famous stuff. So what's a good one to look at? That's not too hard to see. Pretty much all of them. Just wanted a basic drawing. Oh well, we'll go back up. So this is probably this one here, probably. So have a look underneath. They're talking about these three canisters that produce gravitational waves underneath the UFO that can pivot on certain angles, 30 degrees, I guess, to force it upwards and move sideways and so forth. Using element 115 as its energy source to produce the gravitational waves. So that's what he's been saying for a while. So what he's saying is these things, if UFOs are using gravitational waves in this gravitational wave science theory, because a lot of people still say that gravitational waves is bunk science, which means even Bob Lazar is totally wrong in that case. But they've spent billions of dollars on this LIGO to detect these gravitational waves, and it's so sensitive that even a truck driving along the road a mile away will actually cause a wobbling on the laser beams that they use, and they have to counteract it. So it's that sensitive. So if this was producing massive amounts of gravitational waves flying over or near the detector, it would be going off the scale, is what he's saying. If that makes sense. Are you following? Not too sure. You're not saying much. So, so he's grabbing. It would knock the observation info off the mirror's mounts. Okay, maybe a slight exaggeration, but any near-Earth operations of sources described by Lazar would result in huge gravitational wave signals. Wait, unless the observatories are part of the cover-up. So he has a point there, which is quite a valid one, and it sort of blows a hole in his science. Even if it's totally wrong about gravitational rays, means that even the detector that we've built on Earth is wrong, and also the flying saucer concept of how it works is wrong. But I'll talk more about the LIGO after the story, so you can understand what it does. Aside from dealing with Lazar's science being absolute rubbish, also need to discuss what those glowing objects seen by many over Groom Lake actually were. They were, as I apparently didn't lay out forcibly enough 20 years ago, the result of the operation of a proton beam device. So repeat, they were goddamn particle beams. Having said that, I feel much better. So what he's saying is, Whitty took John Lear out into the desert and said they're going to do experiments. You're going to see UFOs. What they're doing is, what he's saying, what they were doing at Groom Lake was trying to work out particle beams for disrupting radar, but also maybe as weapons. And when they fire up in the atmosphere, it eventually forms like a plasma ball at the end point and forms these glowing globes that were flying around. A bit like Foo Fighters, maybe even it comes from German science, maybe, who knows. Remember they talked about the Foo Fighters that sort of went through the aircraft, planes flying over World War II. So now you've heard of ball lightning passing through glass windows and hovering over kitchen tables and then vanishing. It's the sort of same concept of energy. So it could have been like a weapon that they were trying to play around with, or some way to knock out radar technology, and not actually UFOs. So that's what he's saying they were really experimenting with in the desert. I'm not too sure how he knows that, but the way he's talking, he talks to a lot of physicists that actually work at Groom Lake, and they had various skill sets. So he sort of put it together that they were working on particle beams. You know, also Tesla talked about particle beams as well, which is kind of interesting. So now I didn't exactly pull the theory out my ass. So here he goes on. Suggested to me that I might want to pay a visit to my university library and look up something called the Bragg curve. In essence, it relates how far charged particles can penetrate into matter given their initial energy. To be honest, my response was, what does this have to do with anything? The result was something along the lines of, okay, moron, pull a certain dusty old physics reference book and look up Bragg curve equations on the page. Follow the instructions, and after staring at equations for 20 minutes, the sky opened and the rain of understanding soaked me. It was truly, oh shit moment. I've often slow, but I get there eventually. After that, the rest was running the numbers. Since then, I had my posting on particle beings at Groom Lake, shall we say, vetted. I've also spoken to people who have seen these glowing orbs of plasma from a distance and very close up. Finally, I had the chance to ask a real particle physicist who worked at Los Alamos, for real, a family friend, if dumping high energy proton beam into the atmosphere would result in the creation of a glowing ball of plasma. He looked at me quizzically for a while and said he supposed it would, but why would anyone want to? And that is the extremely interesting question. Given Groom Lake's primary mission involving radar countermeasures, I suppose he means, and countermeasures, my sense 20 years ago was that they were testing something possibly for use in radar spoofing. However, in fact, it apparently still remains classified today. The important element in the equation of Lazar's tau suggests maybe its purpose was something else, perhaps an attempt at Star Wars type weapon. In 1980s and 90s, there was many reports in the southwest US of slow-moving, vertically slight, big black triangle craft only seen at night. I've written a bit about these here. I was told by those that know about the stuff that the project's classification continued to this day was due to these craft violating some provisions of weapons treaties the USA had signed. So that's why they're keeping it under wraps. I would speculate that the proton accelerator at Groom Lake generating those flaming balls of plasma 30 years ago might, in a similar manner also violates some weapon treaties and must there stay severely under wraps. So let me completely clear. The glowing orbs seen in the skies over Groom Lake by Lazar were not craft, they were plasma generated by operation of high-powered proton accelerator dumping its beam into the atmosphere. And Lazar knew this. So apparently Lazar uh, managed to get a job out there as like a maintenance crew for fixing electronics and electrical stuff. And obviously he would know they would be testing because Lazar has his own particle beam in his own house that he built, which is nothing fancy, but obviously he knew what they were after, and he got some references together and got a job out there. So it kind of makes sense that maybe he was working there, and they verified that with the phone book name and other things, photographs and whatnot. I guess until we see the documentary, we won't really know what comes out. But what he's saying is he knew they were doing testing of this particular uh, system, and he would take his friends out in the desert to watch it. Sort of like he's like the king man saying, "Oh, come and watch some UFOs," and prank everybody and sort of be the man of the group, sort of thing. So he goes on and talks about all that. So what I've seen, much of the argument supporting Lazar's story on Reddit revolves around whatabouts. But by this I mean that posters say that if Lazar's story was true, then how do you explain fill in the blank? Whatabouts? Following isn't a complete list, but covers most of the occur repeatedly. Lazar worked at Los Alamos, showed George Knapp around there, and people seemed to know him. His name was in the phone book. That's what I just said. Los Alamos newspaper story on Lazar and his jet car. Las Vegas security personnel served by others visited Lazar at his home. Lazar was noted by friends and family to disappear as part of a job. He was able to correctly describe certain aspects of the facilities at Groom Lake. Lazar was able to correctly name specific people involved in the security process. Edward Teller appeared to react visibly and uncomfortably when asked about Lazar in an interview. He received a W2 form from the government. After Lazar's story broke, some media observed possible government surveillance and intimidation. After Lazar went public, persons around Lazar observed what appeared to be vigorous and threatening government attempt to silence him. Lazar knew about element 115 long before it was synthesized, and so on. So that's most of the claims. Posters bring up some damn good points, he says. How is one to explain all these without being a hidden saucer facility at Papoose Lake? Well, it turns out there is very good reason all these things probably did in fact happen, and why Lazar still holds to his nonsensical story. Spoiler, it's about saving his ass. So he talks about how he took people out there to watch the UFO sightings, and the security guards got to hear about it, and they knew it broke his contract terms that he could go to jail for it. So he decided to make the story even bigger. So if he went to jail, I guess you could say, "There you go, I was correct." So they're trying to cover me up, silence me, all that sort of business. So now he's going to get into more details here. This is a really good article that he's written here, but it goes on a bit. What are you saying? Once again, you're stuck with just me. Oh, that's all right. I tend to scare people off. So we're looking at, we're trying to get out of that mainstream media thing where the news feeds us stuff all the time, which is to brainwash us. We now have to look at what other people are saying, which we don't get to hear about. I bet this guy wasn't interviewed for Corbell's movie, and yet this guy's got plenty to say here, and he goes on, he gives the actual factual links and what he's talking about. So let's just go on a wee bit more. After Lazar got his Los Alamos and set up his photo processing business, he managed to get a limited-term contract job with Kirk Mayer. Kirk Mayer was one of the smaller contractors supplying support staff to Los Alamos lab, such as data entry personnel, machinists, fabricators, and electronic technicians. Kirk Mayer never did provide physicists or positions of that caliber. Lazar had some electronic technical education from Pierce College in Southern California and had some work experience with Fairchild. So he was hired as electronic tech with Kirk Mayer. I have interviews with several people who worked with him, and he was described as very clever, troubleshooter and fix-it guy. He was there often enough to get inside, listed in the landline phone directory with the denotation KM next to his name, which was stand for the company he worked for. What was it now? Kirk Mayer. Affiliation of Kirk Mayer. Although the following ad is from the Albuquerque Journal in January 1989, few years after Lazar had left Los Alamos, it probably closely describes Bob Lazar's position at the time. And you can see it's not very clear, but it does say electronic technicians, design and test something, maintenance of vacuum and analogical summit rovers. Yeah, it's pretty blurry. Me, I would have enhanced that and made it bigger. Let's see, can we zoom out? Still not much better, but we'll zoom in. Okay. So microcomputer pass systems, troubleshoot PCs, repair high voltage. So that sort of thing sounds like what Bob would have been doing. I need to go back to that page. So it sounds to me like there is a track of him being there. What have we got? I thought you might have said something. Lazar and his jet car established quite a presence in the small town of Los Alamos, and about a month after arriving, the Los Alamos Monitor newspaper did an article about him. The story described him as a physicist at the lab, but that was in fact only what he told the reporter his position was. Some people who knew him at the time were quite surprised to see that claimed title. I probably should take a small detour to talk about Lazar's jet car. Article focusedly first on demystifying it a bit and to show Lazar's genius talent for low-key self-promotion. So what he's saying is even back then, Bob was known to fib and bend the truth. That's what he's saying. So he's talking about here his knowledge of jetpacks and claims. So he's talking about the claims here of the rocket engines, where he's claiming it had so much thrust. When he looks up the catalog and specifications, there's nowhere near what Bob was saying it was, so he was lying. So he goes on a bit here about the rocket engines, and he talks about where you can find it in a magazine or something, I think, somewhere here. So, an amazing display of totally, he's sworn, effed synchronicity. The Los Alamos newspaper article came out on June 27th, 1982, and the very next day, Edward Teller was scheduled to give a lecture at El Alamos. Had this not happened, I doubt there ever would have been a Bob Lazar story. I gleefully accept that Lazar came upon Teller reading the newspaper and pointed out the story about Lazar and his jet car. I suppose that impressed the guy. Since the story identified Lazar as a physicist, which he lied about, at the lab, I have no doubt that Lazar chatted up Teller, again a master of low-key self-promotion, trying his best to impress Teller. Let's jump forward to 1985 when Lazar blew out of Los Alamos and relocated in Las Vegas. According to the bankruptcy papers, Lazar filed on 21st July 1986. By the way, 128 pages of amazeballs freely available to anyone who wants to pay. Case BK blah blah blah, Federal Bankruptcy Court. So they've actually got a paper trail for it. 120 pages for a bankruptcy. That's quite a lot, isn't it? He stiffed people right and left before leaving Los Alamos, including family members. So it doesn't sound like a really nice guy if that's the case. Even though when you see him on TV, on these documentaries, it seems that he's a really nice, quiet scientist guy. So Lazar pushed around Las Vegas for the next few years. I have information from good sources that during this time he worked very briefly at Smoky Sam site as part of the Nellis training exercises in the northern reaches of Nellis Range. I suspect he had an inkling of what was going on at Groom, as I was told Lazar made a number of overnight trips circumnavigating the Nellis Range. So what's he saying? He went out there to spy on it. Eventually, he discovered E.G. and G's connection with Groom, and also Edward Teller's connection with E.G. and G. So in 1988, he sent Teller a letter. Hey, remember me, the Los Alamos jet car physicist? I have lots of experience with particle accelerators. Since I worked at Alamos Technical Area 53, the Menson facility, which has a 800 MeV proton accelerator. Do you know of any interest in positions where I might be able to put my experience to use? So he's good at self-promotion for sure. Knowing Teller's strangle background, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the man, but in this case, I feel sorry for the guy. Like so many in Lazar's sphere of influence he had. Maybe it was because he was 80 years old at the time and not a sharp, but perhaps he thought Lazar might be an excellent candidate for the proton beam project and made some calls. Things happen and Lazar gets called in for an interview, and seldom the result of a major bad single decision, but usually a cascading series of unwise choices. Such was the case here. Now it boggles my mind how someone with Lazar's bankruptcy record would be granted any sort of clearance by perhaps it hasn't been immediately unearthed. And maybe Teller passed on a crazy glowing recommendation and possibly Lazar had a previous Q clearance from Los Alamos. In any case, security guards visit Lazar's home, so that's that story about them paying a visit, and check him out. They decide he's their guy, at least for now, and he's soon on a Janet flight to Groom on a very limited basis doing non-classified grunt work until his clearance is updated. And in any case, if he didn't already fully know, he does now, that they are operating a proton accelerator at Groom. By the way, they usually fire up on Wednesday nights. Sounds like a good time for a party to me. Figuring out another motives is difficult, especially with Lazar. Specifically, I'm speaking of why he has decided to bring his friends out to see a Wednesday night test. It could be that he realized his clearance was going to fail through due to the bankruptcy, or perhaps it was an attempt to prank his friend John Lear, who Lazar often made fun of for his UFO interests. Or maybe Lazar just thought he was smarter than all those security guards at Groom Lake, and no one would ever know. Or it could have been something as simple as wanting to impress his friends. Don't know, but in any case, he brought them out. But here's the important part. Lazar never told his friends' family the truth. They were seeing the efforts of a proton being. Lazar spun his crazy saucer story to them in this mind, thinking that as long as he's violating security, setting aside for the moment that he was bringing visitors to observe classified tests, the people Lazar brought out to see the test become his most ardent supporters and defenders, because hell, he showed them flying saucers and called the days they showed up. That's pretty damn convincing. So I probably have to agree with that. If this is all true, that sort of nails it on the head to me. I don't know what you think about that, John. Right. You may have fallen asleep on me because you already read it, because I've already sent it around. But I think it needs to be made into a video. That's why I'm doing this. So April 6, 1989, it all comes crashing down. Security discovers our little band of party goers. Bob bolts into the desert. It's starting to sink in that he could be in some serious trouble. He's put the word shit. Lincoln County Sheriff later questions the merrymakers and lets them go. But they had Lazar's ID, and he knew word would quickly get back to Groom. He could be looking at serious jail time. The next day, Lazar is summoned to the Indian Springs airfield, and the full force of Groom Lake security apparatus is directed at him. He now realizes how close to jail he is. The only defense is that he didn't tell his comrades that they were actually seeing, but rather that it was a made-up story of flying saucers. This, of course, doesn't go over well with the security guards, but they are somewhat what's that one? Stimmed. Not sure what that word is. Their choice is: do they prosecute this guy and draw further attention to Groom Lake operations, or just kick him out and intimidate the hell out of him to get him to speak no more? I guess in hindsight, they picked wrong. Unbeknown to the Groom Lake guys, Lazar's tale to his friends cast him as a hero amongst a hopelessly inefficient secret government bureaucracy. They're rallying around him and support, and baffled him, eventually granted interviews to class due to John Lear's urgings. Lazar also have viewed the action as insurance, heightening his profile should Groom Lake come after him. but it required him to fully double down on the alien saucer tale he had wove. Not a bad gig, really. Some minor celebrity attention, along with occasional paid interviews, and he maintains it to this day because, well, he has to. It keeps him out of jail. It's certain that feds have a long memory when it comes to Lazar, and would love to get even for him trashing Groomlate's abilities to run secret operations. So it was him that sort of put Area 51 on the map, wasn't it? So that's what really went down, more or less. No sources, just a really neat proton accelerator and a guy spinning a crazy story to stay out of jail. So that's the true Bob Lazar story, according to this guy. But he goes on and starts giving more information. So, as you can see, it's quite long. Lazar's outing of S4 was anything but. So he's not denying S4 isn't real here. Clearly, there's nothing at Papoose Lake, as a number of people have stated since. I know folks who have been there. Hell, with a good spotting scope, there are even several perches in Mount Cluxton Range which would give a clear view right into the hangar bay doors if they existed. Not that I know anything about that. So he's been out there spying too. Yes, there is a Site 4 associated with the Tonopah test range, tasked primarily with radar issues and nowhere near Papoose. I wrote about this place years ago and it was no secret. Clearly displayed on maps John Lear would have likely had. So, not too sure whether that would be entirely true or not. Whether there could be two S4s, I don't know. It's just called Site 4, isn't it? But this is another interesting part about the W2 form, which is for wages. And when they check it, it comes to a social security number of his dead wife. So has his wife worked for this naval base, and he's still sort of modified the paperwork with his name on it? That kind of suggests that that's what's happened. How you do it back in those days? Photocopy of a photocopy, paste it over, and then photocopy it again without trying to get the lines. It's down here somewhere. So he also talks about element 115, but we'll go to this W2 form, which he talks about a lot. This bogus document. So, United States Department of Naval Intelligence, Robert S. Lazar, but they're saying the social security number, which is up here, is it? Related to his dead wife, which is interesting. So let's go to element 115 bit, because that's also interesting where he would have got the information from. I think people should try and get this guy to interview, It would be a good one to talk about Bob Lazar. And I wonder if Dana Law, because he normally gets hold of these type of people and gets them on his show. I don't think they'd come on my show, though. You're talking about something different, not about Bob Lazar. Chemical trail on Thanksgiving Day. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of jets in the sky that's making contrails. If you have a look at a jet engine, it just sucks in air and shoots the hot air out the back. It doesn't sort of add any chemicals on it. It's all pure water vapor. What you can say is the jets have fumes because they burn kerosene. If you're saying that's a chemical, then you might be on the right track. So here he talks about element 15 breakdown. Many people claim that Lazar had inside info about element 115, before it was actually synthesized? Well, no. Lazar's main claim about element 115 was that it was stable, which amazed folks. But here's the thing, that concept is really old news. I have a 1969 article from Scientific America with a cool 3D graph showing an island of stability around 114. This was also repeated in my undergrad physics book, but maybe most interesting is the article Creighton's Super Heavy Elements by Brusher and Munisberg, published in Scientific America, again talking about a potential island of stability around 115. The article's date was May 1989, the same month Lazar began his interview with KLS-TV in Las Vegas. Yeah, probably just to convince her consider. How do you say that word? Coincidence. That's how you say it. Coincidence. I can say it, but I just can't say it at the moment. Let's see, I used to have a thing here where it could speak it. What is it called? Read aloud. I wonder if that'll work. Let's see if we can hear it. Is it doing something? In fact, I could get it probably to read it all out. Like, is that the one coming up here? No. It used to work. Read aloud. I can't hear it. Maybe I have to unmute it. Let's try again. Looks like that stuffed up. It used to work. It was quite handy when you couldn't pronounce things. Anyway, coincidence is probably what I need to say. Anyway. Oh, and since we're speaking of coincidences, I'm sure that's the case with Lazar and his particle accelerators. When he first surfaced with his story in Las Vegas, media accounts of him were sure to mention that he had a particle accelerator in his bedroom, because that's the mark of a true scientist. That's what Corbell's always been going on about too, isn't it? Later, after the feds busted his Operation Edward, New Mexico, for selling controlled materials, and all the fascinating court documents are now online. Yay! Wired magazine did a piece on Lazar in June of 2006. In it, he has yet another particle being accelerator, which he says he uses to produce a compound for gaseous hydrogen storage. This is pretty far-fetched claim, as the ability to make useful amounts of the compound would take forever with an amateur particle beam accelerator. I wonder what he really might be using those accelerators for. Again, must be a coincidence. Okay, and if you're impressed that someone has their own particle accelerator, you shouldn't. Way back in the early 1960s, Scientific America published an article on how to make a homemade atomic smasher, aka particle accelerator. As a kid, I lusted after the project, but its crux was the need to build a mercury diffusion pump, which sounds pretty dodgy, to achieve the hard vacuum needed in the beam tube. So, beyond the need for a hard vacuum, with pumps now available on eBay, the rest is trivial. But you know why, unless you want to impress others and make plasma balls. At last item for your consideration to determine Lazar's Versatility is his academic background. He claims master degrees from both Caltech and MIT in subjects that don't offer, and during time periods he couldn't have physically been at either campus. In response to questions at the Ultimate UFO seminar in Rachel, New York in May of 1993, Lazar was so kind as to offer up the names of two of his instructors at Caltech and MIT, Dr. Luxer and as well as Honsfeld. He even spelt them. Stanton Freeman told me he was searching for Dupla, and no such person ever taught at Caltech or MIT. However, he did find a William Duxler who taught math and physics at a previous mentioned Pierce College, and confirmed to Freeman that Lazar had taken at least one of his courses in 1970s. So he was a high school teacher then, not a professor at Caltech. As for finding Holmesfield, Freeman rolled snaked eyes beyond confirming no one by that name ever taught at Caltech or MIT. However, did you know that in this amazing 21st century you can buy reprints of all sorts of old high school yearbooks, like for example the 1976 yearbook for W. Chesper Clark High School, and if one were to do, one would find that there was a technical and vocational teacher there by the name of Frederick Horsfeld. Looks like he was teaching electronics. Interesting, no? So he named two people from courses that he probably was in. That's what they're saying there. Not university. I've never understood why Lazar clings to these imaginary master degrees when they have been so thoroughly proven to be lies. Lazar's fans would easily accept an explanation of simple resume pattern, but I have to grudgingly concede Lazar has some mighty evils in his manner. I have read that the probation report submitted to the court when Lazar was busted for pandering in Nevada in 1990. That means he got caught in a prostitution ring. Under oath to the probation agent preparing the report, Lazar continued to claim he had these degrees. Dude, you got some game. As for sources stories, the rest of that just a story told to keep him out of jail, to which he must still firmly cling. So you have to ask yourself, am I going to believe a fantastic story told by someone with a well-established record of exaggeration and deceit, and there is much more plausible explanation for the same events? So there you go. It goes on a bit. But like I said, I've posted the link there if you want to go and read it all yourself and do further research on it. So just wondering how much Corbell has addressed any of this. Some will certainly dismiss all the above as say I'm just a debunker or even an agent of the government. They call me that too. Out to get Lazar. Far from it, I just happen to place a premium on truth, and folks that waste other people's time annoy me. So this guy's very much like I am. When I first heard Lazar's story many years ago, it sounded plausible. Thus, I do have some empathy and understanding of those that have watched his interviews and swallowed it all. It wasn't until I started looking into his details of his claims that I began to think he might not be telling the truth. Fun fact, my very first investigatory act was to spend time going through Caltech yearbooks to find a passing mention of him, and as I actually expected him to be there, surprised he wasn't there. As for my beliefs, I happen to think that UFOs are quite real phenomenon. I'm not inclined to take any strong position on just precisely what they are, but I read too much and know too many well-connected individuals to dismiss them. And beyond that, I think it's highly likely we are in possession of some sort of stuff from the phenomenon from crashed recoveries or whatever. Finally, I'm sure there are at least a few very dark government programs dealing with this sort of thing, but Lazar never worked for any of them. To wrap this up, I'd like to leave you a quote reportedly straight from the mouth of Lazar, related to me by someone who once knew him. The more credible the lie, the more people will believe it. That sounds like a Secure Team 10 quote, doesn't it? His quote was, gullible people equals money in the bank, according to people that knew him, that sort of become non-friends anymore. So yeah, that's the whole document there. And he talks about his wife, Carol Lazar, died in Las Vegas in 1986, and that W2 form appears to be hers. So yeah, that was pretty much that. So now I need to talk about what LIG is, because he mentions it. And may possibly wrap it up tonight, because we ain't got too many people watching. Stephen is retired. He is now. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Bob Lazar, the real story, not the movie. I think maybe some other people fell asleep there. But what's happened? I'm getting a USB disconnect going on. Anyway, I think it's working. So, gravitational waves. Let's see where to begin. Just get the right document. Come on. So he talked about LIGO. LIGO is the most largest gravitational wave observatory. It consists of 2 detectors situated 3,000 kilometers apart in an isolated region in the states of Washington. Each L-shaped facility has 2 arms positioned at right angles. So we're showing the picture here. And they fire lasers down them. And if gravitational waves were real and it bends space, it will bend the laser beams and just a wee bit, and they would detect it, basically. Each L-shaped facility has 2 arms positioned at right angles to each other, running 2.5 miles from a central building. Lasers are beamed down each arm and bounced back by mirrors, essentially acting as a ruler for the arm. Sensitive detectors can tell if the length of the arms of the LLG detector varies by as much as little as 1/10,000th of a width of a proton, representing the incredible small scale of effects imparted by passing gravitational waves. LIGO has 2 observatories to act as a check on the other to rule out a potential gravitational single detection is not due to a local terrestrial disturbance. So they're talking about Earth tremor, but still there's problems with that. So I'm going to talk about that. LIGO has 2 observatories. Yep. Where did we get to? Speed of light. Both facilities will detect a tiny true gravitational wave moving at the speed of light nearly simultaneously. Although the twin LIGO facilities act as a single observatory, They are not designed for observing in conventional sense. Instead of eyes, the facility can be thought more as ears listening to gravitational waves, or even a skin trying to feel the slightest of movements. So in his report about Bob Lazar, he was talking about this interferometer. LIGO's observations are technically known as interferometers, used in many scientific fields. Merge two or more sources of light in order to create a interference pattern. Such patterns result in overlapping waves of light. When the peaks of the two waves of light overlap, they combine to form a larger peak. So what he was saying about the Bob Lazar story was, if the UFOs are using that technology that Bob claims, then these LIGOs would be going off the scales, because they'll be able to detect the massive gravitational wave coming down in the atmosphere through the planet. So he says that hasn't happened, so they're not detecting those big massive pulses coming from the Earth itself, because the UFOs are near it, because they're trying to detect it from outer space here. So they're so sensitive. So it's saying here, there's many things besides gravitational waves that can upset LIGO's sensitive instruments, including vehicles on nearby roads, seismic waves, slight temperature differences, and even a tidal tugging off the sun and moon. Therefore, the experiment designers want to extraordinary lengths to compensate for those mirrored vibrations and forces. So they've only detected what, 4 times now. So yeah, if we had UFOs with gravitational waves flying around the atmosphere all the time, like Bob was saying, or even at Area 51, this thing would be detecting them all the time, and it's not. So conventional science there sort of debunks it, because you just heard in interviews that Corbell saying that people say his science is wrong, but they don't actually prove it. But the theory of the science does debunk it. But the problem I have with gravitational waves is they're sort of linked into the Big Bang myth theory, and they don't exist. I've explained other ways that UFOs will work using Tesla's ideas. So you can go and watch those on other streams. I'm not going to repeat it all again, but yeah, doesn't mean he's right either. But it's good to know about other thinking out there, opposed to what you're being told by mainstream media. So you can see here, there's a few more things about the thing, and it says LIGO's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, since LIGO is designed to sense the smallest conceivable motions of mirrors caused by the passage of a fleeting gravitational wave. It is also extremely sensitive to all vibrations near, such as trucks driving on nearby roads. So that's how sensitive it is. So what they've done is they've tried to put it on earthquake, what they call it, isolation pads. So they counteract any earthquake wobble and apply a negative to it, like noise cancelling headphones, like he says here. Any small vibrations are cancelled out. But I still have my feeling that they won't be able to cancel out all the movements of the Earth, because the Earth is spinning around at 900 kilometers per hour, and we don't feel it because we're on the surface. And of course, then the Earth is spinning around the Sun also at something ridiculous speed. What was it now? Can't remember now. 1,000 miles per second or something like that. and then we're spinning around on the spiral arm of the galaxy, and then that spot is spinning around the universe. So yeah, you get all that 3D motion stuff happening. I don't know if you can test for even gravitational waves while you're on the planet. It would have to be out in space, I would suspect. Not even orbiting. You want it far enough so it's sort of like not orbiting anything. It's sort of stagnant. Is my feeling about the experiment. But also, there's some articles here where they're sort of debunking it all as well. So I'll post that one here. And of course, people are also saying what the problems are with it. LIGO. And I think he's bulleted it here. Non-repeatable, non-verifiable. External pressure to produce results. Lack of accuracy, questionable laser isolation, which is what I was talking about, the earthquakes and all that. Questionable mirror isolation, also the same thing about truck movement on the road and stuff. Insufficient mirror tolerances. Lack of third-party environmental monitoring. Gravitational wave single limitations, which is it detects gravitational waves that transverse perpendicular to them, stretching and compressing the lengths of their long L-shaped arms. However, time difference between the two signals was less than 7 milliseconds. This means the waves would have to travel one parallel to the other detector, which would have made them significantly more difficult to detect. Bias and skewed pattern matching and misleading audio. The LIG team converted the visible pulsation of light that was observed into an audible chirp in an attempt to reinforce their ring-down description of the supposedly merging black holes and the resulting gravitational wave generation. This has misled the public into believing that the media and many so-called science sites into reporting that the actual sound was detected as part of the LIGO team's discovery. This was a complete misdirection. So it must have been on TV or on TV news where they're getting a clip noise when they're reporting that they detected the collision or something. Objects are far beyond detection range. Detection occurred before official observations began. Only one observation in over 4 months. Questionable and lacking follow-up. So this guy really just tears it all apart. So let's see, what ones have I posted? So that's how it works. So I'll post that one. And close that one down. And the problems with it, you can have a read off. But it doesn't stop there. So now they're looking at seismic isolation for advanced LIGO. So it looks like they're building or modifying it, because obviously the first results they've got, they're still questioning whether it was related to the Earth, internal Earth. So I found that there. So they're talking about vacuum tubes, was it? Let's see. Mechanics and function of these platforms has been extensively studied in previous works. Active isolation configuration performance of blah blah blah. So where was a bit? base design concept and seismic isolation component of the proposed advanced LIG detector upgrade has been developed. This was this year, I think. Oh no, 2012. That's pretty old, isn't it? I mean 2002, not 12. So it looks like they've been modifying it ever since, you know, trying to get the wobbles out. Quantum gravity. So yeah, consists of two-stage vacuum active isolation platform that's supported by an external hydraulic actuation stage. So I don't know if that's on the current one or they're upgrading it because of that the year number there, so I'm not too sure. But I thought I'd include that there. Maybe they're still upgrading and playing around with it then. So what's this one say? Oh yeah, this one about the gravitational waves being a hoax. And this was talking about the detection. Second gravitational wave detected from ancient black hole collision. That's what they were talking about, the chirp sound, I guess. Physics has detected ripples in the fabric of space-time. So as soon as I hear space-time and Big Bang Theory, it sort of straight away throws me off because I've talked about space-time and how it can be interpreted a different way. Was set in motion by a collision of two black holes billions of years ago. The event marks only the second time the scientists have spotted gravitational waves. The tremendous stretching and squeezing of space-time predicted by Einstein more than a century ago. Faint signal received by twin instruments of the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory LIGO in the US revealed two black holes. This confirmation that there's a real population of black holes out there. So what happened? Well, this guy talks about it, the skeptic. So that was the second one, and this would have been the first one that they detected with it from the same Guardian. Gravitational waves, why it's impossible not to be thrilled about the discovery. Firstly, we have seen ripples in space, and the fact that we expected them makes it even more amazing. Fabric of the universe, which is contained in Einstein's general relative, has made yet another valid prediction. In fact, the beautiful elegance of the theory is a little deceptive. So it goes on a bit. So you can see the sort of Einstein fans, and they like the maths. But this guy, so what's he saying? Was the gravitational wave experiment worth a 1.1 billion cost to the taxpayer? Is there any substance to the outlandish claims seen across mainstream media headlines recently about those exclusive gravitational waves supposedly detected? The answer is, of course, no. The detailed rebuttal below proves that the whole thing is yet another money-maker scam courtesy of government-sponsored science. So there's a better picture of the facility with the L-shaped arms. So there's two of those that work together, two facilities. Gravity waves of propaganda. So this guy's saying it's all bunk, which means Bob Lazar's gravitational wave idea is bunk as well, if that's the case. The discovery of gravitational waves has been announced again. In the expose, I was first to analyze the mainstream announcements. I will then look at the actual scientific paper showing you how to read it. I have to say this for them, these people never quit. No, if they get caught in one particular lie, they just wait a year and a half and come back with another one. I guess they are relying on the short-term memory of most people, but when I heard this announcement of gravity waves today, I said to myself, didn't they already do this? Didn't we get a huge announcement of gravity waves in 2014? Didn't Alan Guth win a $1 million prize for that? In fact, he did. And he, along with Alexei Starbusky and Andre Lindy, won the Calverley Prize in July 2014. So $3 million was allegedly paid out. According to mainstream stories at the time, the proximate cause of these prizes was the discovery of gravitational waves by BICEP2 on March 17, 2014. Of course, all those stories from 2014 have been rewritten, downplaying the claim of gravity waves and playing up the alleged discovery of cosmic inflation. However, when a few months later, after the publication of my Russian paper of March 18, they had to admit this announcement was only horrible premature, it was flat wrong. To save face, they claimed the dust in the Milky Way exactly mimicked the signature of gravity waves. This despite having claimed in the peer-reviewed papers in March that they had ruled out and claiming a positive detection at sigma 7. Sigma of 7 indicated that BICEP2 only emitted a 0.0001% chance that they were wrong. That's 1 in 10 billion. Funny then they had to admit they were wrong only a couple of months later. Strange how it always works out that way. Whether they are claiming faster than light detections, dark matter detections, or whatever. At the time, we were told BICEP bent out their main competitors in the search for gravity waves. The LIGO team, LIGO congratulated the BICEP team for their earth-shattering discovery. Well, it is LIGO's turn now, since they have now claimed a gravity wave detection. Do they have a third team in the wings? I wonder just this one also ends up in ruins. They had better, because I can already tell the whole story is manufactured from nothing. The first clue is that the paper is once again hiding behind 1,000 authors. We saw the same thing with the manufactured Higgs detection, which I believe had more authors than than that. The truth doesn't need such a large bandwidth. But I knew even before the first clue, since I know gravity waves don't exist. I assume all these physicists know it too, but the truth doesn't butter anyone's bread. Einstein knew it. They admit it in articles that Einstein once told the world gravity waves don't exist. They tell you in a flip-flop both times, saying they did exist, but then didn't tell you why Einstein flipped. He flipped under pressure from the mainstream, who didn't like him telling the truth. We see this all the time in the subject. Someone blows the whistle on something big project, and spooks visit him and twist his arm, and suddenly he changes his mind. This is what's happened with Einstein. Gravity waves can't be a vindication of general relativity, as they claim, since in general relativity, gravity is a force. It's just a curved math. It isn't a force, I mean, it's just a curved mass, because he's just a maths guy. Beyond that, according to Einstein, GR isn't mediated by particles, but has no background. in GN there is no ether, remember? Remember that was Tesla's thing, the ether? Remember Einstein once agreed with Tesla that ether energy level existed? And at the last minute changed it to this relativity thing. So what are gravity waves supposed to be made of? What is it wavering? We get no sensible answer to that today. Physics today is nothing but a huge pile of ever-growing nonsense. Since I know you can't detect something that doesn't exist, I know that this detection is manufactured without further study. So this is what I call Big Bang scientist. He doesn't like him either. Here is all it says concerning that in the announcements. According to the equation, physicists have settled on gravitational waves would compress space in one direction and stretch it in another as they traveled outwards. But according to Einstein, there is no space in that sense. According to the stated postulates of general relativity, space is not something that could be compressed or stretched, since it's neither or an ether nor a physical background of any material sort. For Einstein, space could be curved, and it could be curved simply by applying the tensor calculus to it, which already contained the curves, but the tensor calculus has no mechanism for stretching or compressing space. To say it another way, there is no possible mechanism for gravity to work on space in that way. The theory of gravity waves is outrageous, non-mechanical, and non-physical. So this guy's just blowing gravitational waves out the water. So that sort of blows Bob Lazar's story out of the water too. This is why they used to search for gravitons, although GR also has no use for gravitons, since gravity as curved space does not require a meditating particle. The mainstream used to look for gravitons because they knew they needed them to sell this gravity wave nonsense. In compressed space, you need something in space to compress. With gravitons, you can say that individual gravitons are getting nearer, indicating compression. Compression is then a function of particle densities, but it is compressing space, but has no physical meaning. You can't compress a vacuum because there is nothing to respond to pressure, and it is words without physical content. In the latest announcements, we are told mirrors in the arms of LIGO moved 0.004 the diameter of a proton, indicating that two black holes were colliding somewhere in the distance. Where? Why aren't we aren't told? We are only told that two of them were 36 times as massive as the Sun, and other 29 times as massive. In the collision, 3 solar masses were released. Where did they get those numbers? They just made them up out of thin air? Okay, but what indication, oops, let's scroll on. Do we have movement of the mirrors which was caused by that rather than anything else? The signal confirmed precisely the prediction of general relativity for black holes as calculated in computer simulation. Dr. Ritzy said, really? That's all we get? We can see why I now think that this is all a joke. These people don't even try to fake the science method anymore. In the method, you would have to cross off all the other courses of that tiny motion. He's talking about internal earth forces, of course, and maybe even air pressure wave coming down, or something else we don't know. Since you can't possibly do that in this case, assigning the motion to hypothetical black holes is just a farce. At the Guardian, it says the finding completed the scientific arc of prediction, discovery, and confirmation. First, they calculated what they should be able to detect, then decided what the evidence should look like, and then devised the experiment that clinched the matter. Which is not on Thursday, scientists around the world were able to call the announcement as yet another confirmation of their standard model of cosmos and the beginning of a new era of discovery. They missed something there, didn't they? This isn't the arc of science, is it? It is missing a couple of important steps. After deciding what was evidence might look like, they should be required to show that the evidence they have found is coming from the source they claim. They have utterly failed to do that. There is zero evidence this came from a collision of black holes. They don't even try to point to the black hole that was allegedly formed. So, to start with, how could you possibly damp this machine from all other tiny wiggles? LIGO's antenna are 2.5 miles long, so in the first instance, it should act like a gigantic sizer monitor reacting to every least motion on the surface of the planet from whatever course. Since you cannot possibly damp it from that, you would have to monitor seismic activity in another way and subtract it out. Could you do that down to the level of a proton? He says, no, you can't. But even if you could, you would be against the infinitude of other problems. What about the charge field of the Earth? Even if you don't believe in the charge field, I can get you there by just renaming it heat. You don't believe in heat of the Earth? Well, the heat emitted by the Earth varies over time and place. So again, you would never love and love would either have to damp or subtract out. LIGO's antennas are L-shaped with perpendicular arms. So he's going through here pretty well, debating it to pieces. So I won't read out any more of it. Let's see. But it's a good article. Probably scared most of you off. Oh, we've still got 3 watching. So yeah. So reading all these science papers and stuff, it's sort of blown a hole straight in Bob Lazar's story of science. And we haven't even looked at Element 115, but I have done it in that S4V Investigator documentary, if you've not seen it. So, Gravitational waves debunked. So when you have people doing interviews online with Richard Dolan called Gore Powell saying these people don't know what they're talking about. He's talking about gravitational waves and all that in the interview. Clearly, he hasn't read some of the stuff I have just read out. That's not how you spell it, is it? Gravitational. But if you read that, if you were here for the first part of the Bob Lazar story, that guy said if LIGO was actually working, it would be detecting what was going on at Area 51 with the gravitational craft, because it's that sensitive. So he says that blows a hole straight in the way in Bob's story, but this guy is saying there's no such thing as gravitational waves, full stop. So that blows another 2 holes in that debate of it. Yeah, and if you have a look here, they talk about this bicep 2, which will be probably time for me to wrap up on this actually. And I'll just read this bit out here where they talk about detecting it and then they realized they made a mistake. Whereabouts was the bit? Cosmologists believe that when the universe was young, a mere 10 minus 20, 35, after the Big Bang. So as soon as we start to hear about the Big Bang, it underwent a period of extreme rapid expansion known as inflation, blah, blah, blah. In March last year, Bicep scientists claimed success, saying they had found measured primordial beam modes with statistical certainty of 7 whatever that thing is. Well, the 5Q gold standard for discovery in physics. However, doubt soon crept in, especially about how the team had handled the effect of galactic dust on the result. Also, the bicep measurements used in the 2014 analysis were made at just one frequency of 150 kilohertz. For a signal to be truly cosmological in nature, it must be cross-checked at multiple frequency. When the most recent dust maps from Planck were released in September last year, it became apparent that the polarized emission from the dust is much more significant over the entire sky than Bicep 2 had allowed for. So yeah, they made errors and then made a conclusion that was based on an error. So that was another.